Welcome back to People Analytics. I'm your host, Lindsay Patton. Today I have with me Buck Seggelke, and he is head of people at Wodify. Hi, Buck. Welcome.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Great. So give us an intro about who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Yeah, sure. So I am the head of people at Wodify, as you said, responsible for the people operations programs at the organization. I've been in people operations, HR recruiting for about 15 years overall at this point. I've been in leadership roles for probably about the past 10 at various software companies. I've been in tech for about the past 10 as well. I do this because, I like helping people. I like solving problems. I mean, that's at the core. That's what people operations and HR does, is help people solve problems and, reduce liability. And all of that is very much, very much appealing.
Yeah, so what I really, love about your passion is you're passionate about engagement, and engagement in the workplace is something to be really concerned about. It's on the decline. It encourages turnover within an organization. So how do you view engagement as a leader?
Yeah, so to me, engagement is your ultimate state of being. It's a goal and it's a result of excuse me, all of the people operations activities and projects and initiatives that you put together are focused on the ultimate goal of having engaged, happy employees. And engagement, the arguments out there for engagement are pretty irrefutable at this point. It's something like 17% more productive and profitable. 67% less turnover in engaged employees. And I think, the biggest one for me is that, especially in the technology world, when engaged employees reach that threshold of psychological safety, that's really where they're at their most productive and most innovative. That's where they're putting together kind of the world beating projects and things of that nature, because they feel safe enough to take the risk. And they feel safe enough to bring forward these crazy ideas because they know there's not going to be any repercussions, and that stems from engagement. That stems from them, having meaningful work, feeling like that work makes an impact, and from, knowing where they stand with the organization and knowing that, they are being successful in their roles.
I like what you said, knowing where they stand in an organization, because at least in my career experience, I had to wait till my annual review, or there's always that anxiety looming of, am I not doing this well enough? Or does this person have an issue with me that they're not telling me? So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think anybody who's got a hint of anxiety has felt that at some point in their career, right? And, with big monolithic organizations, typically they're doing the, annual performance review where they're stack ranking and cutting the bottom 10%. And that's a path to complete disengagement. If I have to wait a year for you to tell me, how well I did on something that was 8 months ago, I'm not going to be a very engaged employee.
Yeah.
Engagement to me stems from a few different things. It's first and foremost, I think it starts in onboarding. And I divide onboarding into 4 steps. There's pre-hire, there's orientation, there's integration, and there's follow-up. And each one of those steps is designed to start to engage the employee right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So, during pre-hire, it's the time in between offer acceptance and start date, and you're keeping them warm. Maybe you're throwing them like, hey, this is a cool podcast you should listen to that our CEO did. This is some information about your benefits package. This is how we do performance management here, et cetera, et cetera. And then orientation, you're really showing them, kind of giving them, the culture presentation. And this is how the different departments interact with each other in our organization. And then during integration, that's where they get their first definition of success. Their manager needs to sit them down in the first one-on-one and say, hey, this is what I expect of you out of this role. This is your 30, 60, and 90-day plan. And this is what success looks like. and very clearly delineate, what it is that, 30 days from now, this is what you should have accomplished. 60 days, this is it. 90 days, this is it. And that could be training, that could be, virtually anything. But what it does is that employee knows right off the bat whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then following up with that employee, from both an HR perspective to ensure that they're getting what they need, and that one-on-one actually occurred is number two. But and then once you're done with the onboarding phase, you're into the normal performance management phase, and that's training on giving and receiving feedback. That's easing them into the actual performance management system, which for us is mandated manager check-ins with that person on a cadence that works for both the employee and the manager. So, I recommend monthly. I know some organizations do as much as 2 weeks. As long as it happens quarterly, I'm okay. And as long as two people are in agreement that quarterly is enough, then I'm okay with that. But during that check-in, that manager is, again, it's not the only place that feedback is. It's a review of feedback that's been given since the last check-in. But that feedback is constant. That feedback is a constant flow of information from employee to manager and manager to employee. It's something that happens on a daily basis. And then your review or your manager one-on-one is simply an opportunity for you to review that feedback and check in with your manager on how you've been performing against that definition of success. So with a constant cycle of feedback and the manager check-ins, not only do you understand where you stand, but it's codified in a single source of truth.
Yeah.
And so what that does is prevents any of that anxiety from occurring, because your manager is giving you constant feedback. Your peers are able to give you feedback too, but that depends upon the size of the organization too. You want a threshold of anonymity there, but when you're done with that one-on-one, you're walking out of there saying, okay, so according to the definition of success for my performance, I'm at X, Y, and Z, and according to the feedback that I've gotten and reviewed, it all backs that up. And so from there, they know exactly where they stand. They're able to course correct quickly if something is going wrong, and they're able to reinforce, the fact that they are doing a good job and remain engaged with the organization. And so, and that flows all the way through. If I put somebody on a performance improvement plan, it should not be a surprise to them. It should never ever be a surprise. If we have to terminate somebody, it should not be a surprise to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it does really is it strives to engage the employees, but it also, it goes multiple ways, right? And so, engagement is the ultimate goal. But in some cases, it clues an employee into like, hey, maybe this isn't the right place for me, right? Like I'm really struggling to live up to this definition of success. And instead of us having to go through a disciplinary process with that person, they're able to recognize, quicker that, hey, maybe this isn't the right place for me. Maybe I should find something else. But, hopefully we did our job in hiring and that doesn't happen. but in some instances, it does happen. And, even at my organization now, we do the offer, where after 3 weeks of employment, we'll go to an employee and say, hey, if this isn't the place you thought you were joining, we'll give you a severance package right now and you can walk away. Totally fine. No harm, no foul.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really, really just cool. And I never heard of anything like that before. And especially, for Staff Geek's model, having that focus on the culture fit is so necessary, and why, Staff Geek has seen success with the organizations that we work with is because there's that mutual, it's like that puzzle piece fitting together. When you have someone that fits the culture, it's going to work. And if someone doesn't fit the culture, why would you try to fit two puzzle pieces together that don't match? It's just going to be very stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, culture fit is very important. I can't take credit for the offer. The offer was something they were doing prior to me getting here.
Mhm.
And it stems from Zappos, the online
Okay,
the
yeah.
online retailer. Back in the, I want to say, early to mid aughts, I guess, is that what you call that decade?
Yeah.
the the aughts, Zappos's culture was very much the rage.
Mhm.
Very, very strong. And, we're lucky enough to have engaged with them probably 2 or 3 years prior to me getting here. And we still maintain contact with, somebody over there who is very integral to their culture. And she has helped us immensely as far as, executive coaching and things like that. But yeah, that was something that they did to make sure that, you were fully bought in once you get out of training. When you talk about culture fit, that's becoming a very dangerous word right now, because it's a word that, instead of it being used for its true meaning, like, you want somebody who's going to come in, is aligned with your culture and everything like that. What we're really looking for is there, are they a value fit? Do they fit our values, and are they going to add to our culture, right? So instead of more of the same, like, is this person directly aligned with Wodify's culture? And yeah, we look for certain personality characteristics that are aligned with our culture. But what we're really looking for is, does this person believe in our values? Is this person going to lead like a business owner? Is this person going to invest in themselves and others? Are they going to operate with integrity? And are they gonna stay positive? You know, and then from there, it's like, okay, they're going to hit that. So what do they bring to our culture that we don't have right? What diversity of thought do they bring to the table? What disparate experience do they bring to the table? That sort of thing. So it's really cool to root, your culture is rooted in your values, but to root your hiring process and make sure that values are a big part of it. Because if the values match up, the culture fit more than likely is going to match up. And then being able to look for people that are going to add to your culture and diversify your culture and enrich your culture is really cool as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about engagement a little bit more. And I'd like to get your opinion on why engagement decline is such a modern issue right now.
Well, I think there's a few different reasons for that. First off, if you go back, 20 to 30 years, nobody cared about engagement. There was a different generation that was at the forefront of the workforce, and that was a generation that was extremely loyal to their employers. But then you have a generation like I'm right on the cusp of Generation X and Millennial. Depending upon what definition, I'm a Generation X or I'm a millennial. It depends upon what definition you use, right? But we're a generation that watched our parents work for an organization for 25 years and then be unceremoniously shown the door. We watched them, work at factories, and all of a sudden the factories were moved to different places. They were integral parts of the operation until they weren't. You know, and so for us, it's about what I think that did was it changed our perspective, and we show as much loyalty to an organization as that organization shows to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's only been magnified in Generation Z and the millennials. And so what that means is that organizations have to pay attention to retention, and because turnover costs money. Turnover is going to cost you anywhere from 30 to 70% of that outgoing employee's salary to fill that role. A lot of it's an opportunity cost, but it's still a huge cost to the organization. And because that attitude of getting a job out of college and working there for 25 years, because that attitude has changed so much, and because there's so much more opportunity, it's incumbent on employers to do everything they can possibly do to retain their employees, because they're investing so much in development. And from that perspective, the number one factor in whether or not an employee is going to stay is, are they engaged? Are you providing them with the opportunity to become engaged? And a lot of what people need to become engaged is growth opportunities. The benefits package has to be right. They have to be able to understand where they stand with the organization, like we stated. They have to have a clear career path. They want professional development. There's a lot of different things that organizations are doing now that they didn't do, even 20 years ago when I started my career. There were some certain perks and stuff like that, but employers took their benefits package, their salaries, and said, "Okay, here you go." And there wasn't much beyond that. There were some organizations like a Google that really flipped everything on its head because they took a very different approach to hiring. They took a very different approach to engaging their employees, and it was something that most companies had not seen. And I think there were a lot of people that had worked at those big companies that didn't want to do that anymore, and that understood after seeing a lot of good people leave those organizations that you have to take extra steps to retain your best employee. And I think once, I talked about, I mentioned briefly that, this generation shows as much loyalty to the employer as the employer shows to them. Well, that's not to say they're disloyal. If an employer shows them that they're invested in them and takes steps to really engage that employee, this generation is going to be just as loyal as anywhere else, as any other generation. I think the difference is that this generation is forcing employers to engage them and make sure they're engaged in order to keep them. And it's engagement, just on its face is so much more important, or it's so important for the stability of your business, the production of your business, the profitability of your business. All of that, when it boils down to, your business is your employees doing their jobs day to day. And if they're not engaged in their jobs, they're not going to perform at a high level. And if they're not performing at a high level, your company's not performing at a high level. So,
right. And so with Wodify, you increased engagement. Can you go into details about, when you came in and how you increased that engagement?
Yeah, sure. So there was, there was definitely a really great, my predecessor had left a really great kind of, people operations backbone
Great.
in there. I think she was there for like a year and a half, maybe something like that. And she had done a lot of work on developing, like performance reviews and stuff like that. And that being said, COVID hit the organization very hard. It was a transition from an office location to being a completely hybrid workforce, and that impacted engagement quite a bit. And so, the backbone that was in place needed to be tweaked. Like I said, it was solid. She did great work, but the environment had changed.
Yeah, it's a new world.
It was a new world, and I think there was definitely a backbone in place, and there were surveys that had been conducted as well. I think they conducted a survey in spring of 2021 before I got here, and the ENPS score was a 19, right? And so what we put in, the first thing we did was when I got in was revamp the onboarding. We certainly revamped the onboarding piece. There was a lot of great stuff in there that we were able to keep and retain, but we revamped the way we did it. We turned it into, kind of a more high touch situation, which, at the start doesn't sound too efficient, but it pays dividends down the road. Investing in being high touch in your onboarding and making sure that it's not just, a factory line pumping out people for your organization is paramount. It's got to be high touch. It's got to be, personalized. It's got to be, it's the employee's first introduction to the company, and you want that introduction to be as rooted in your values as possible. And so, we were able to revamp that onboarding. And then at the same time, we were scaling immensely. I think we were 37 employees when I started, and by the end of the year, we were at 75.
Wow.
So yeah, we hired a ton of people. And so by executing that onboarding and then by rolling out, we did an engagement survey in September. And that, basically when we're looking at performance management and we're looking at, engagement levels, you need to have a baseline and you need to understand what it is your employees need to feel engaged. And, what the lack was here was there was a lack of feedback given by the managers. And like most other places, we had a few very experienced managers, and then we had a bunch of managers that had transitioned from being individual contributors into the management role.
I see.
And that is a great thing. I love to promote from within whenever possible, but it's also a double-edged sword in that you have to train those people on how to be managers, because otherwise they're going to default to being individual contributors. When things get rough, they're going to want to dive in and do it themselves rather than manage the folks underneath them, right? And when they dive in and do it themselves, it alienates the rest of their employees and is poor for engagement, right?
Yeah.
And so we had a group of managers who really had high potential, and some of them were really, really good. Some of them, all of them were good, but some of them were really good. Some of them were just good, right? And so what we did was, we put folks through, we listened to the survey results. We looked at what the employees wanted from our baseline, and we started to implement that. And what they wanted was feedback. They wanted transparency on performance, and that's what we began to roll out and give them. And the first step in that is training your managers on how to do that. Because that's not my responsibility as HR. I cannot go through and give 73 people performance reviews, right? That's not how that works. And so, we implemented a new leader success program that really talked about, first and foremost, management and how you manage in the Wodify way. And with that, there's a big emphasis on empathy and compassion. There's a big emphasis on figuring out what your leadership style is. But the biggest emphasis is on talk to your employees, figure out how they like to receive feedback, and consistently give them feedback in that manner, right? And so the second portion was a giving and delivering feedback course that everybody in the organization took.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was it's about an hour and a half long. It's by no means a master class. But what it does is provide employees the tools to be able to A, start to think critically about feedback, and B, kind of some of the guardrails around what good feedback and poor feedback is. Good feedback needs to be timely. It needs to, feedback should either reinforce, remediate, or recognize behavior, right? Those are the types of feedback that we want to see. We want to see constructive feedback, and we want to see constructive feedback delivered in a manner in which the employee is going to digest it. Because if you don't deliver it like that, then the employee is not going to pay attention to it.
Right.
if somebody gives me feedback in a way that I don't prefer my feedback to be in, it's just going to piss me off, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it as like an insult or something like that, or nitpicky or something like that. And so, different people like feedback different ways. Some people like the spoonful of sugar. Some people like it very, very direct. And as a manager, it's incumbent on you to figure out how your employees like it and deliver it in that way so that your employees feel like it's genuine feedback and that, it's actionable. Right. And so, delivering those classes, and then after those classes were done, we rolled out our performance management system. And like I said, that was based on, it's based out of Lattice. Lattice is a software that is our kind of single source of truth for performance. It was based on, job competencies, which my predecessor had done a great job of getting together for the organization. And it was based on employees growing into the next competency. So it was providing that career path for the employees. The feedback that went into Lattice was focused traditionally on the growth of the employee. And, it was constructive or it was non-constructive, but essentially, when I say non-constructive, it was, that's like recognition. That's like, hey, you did a great job here,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, we mandated that managers were having a one-on-one with their employees at least one time per quarter. And, more if the employee felt like they needed more. Personally, I met with my boss bi-week, right? Or twice a month. And I felt like that was sufficient for me to feel like I was, on the right track, right? But they would sit down with the employee, look at the competency level that they were in, look at the competency level that they were trying to get to, and then set growth goals to get them to that next competency level. And then each check-in was a progress check against those growth goals. And those growth goals could be quarterly, they could be an annual growth goal, whatever it takes, right? But the bottom line is that by implementing that, our ENPS score in September was a 59, which is really, really good.
And what was the original number again? Could you repeat that?
It was a 19.
19 to 59. Amazing.
And so the 19 to 59 in September, I thought, okay, well, we have a lot of people still on their honeymoon period. Okay. And so the real telling one is going to be the March engagement survey. You run that. And so we reran the engagement survey. I like to run them at about 6 months at a time. And that prevents survey fatigue, and it also, gives enough time for there to be a real impact on the numbers. Mm-hmm. And I was warning the leadership team. I said, there's probably going to be a fall in that number. We had a lot of people on the honeymoon period. And once they've gotten into, real work, I expect that number to probably decline. But keep in mind that, anywhere above, for this organization, anywhere in the 20s to the 30s is going to be a great score. Mm-hmm. And we ran the survey, and the survey came back as a 51.
Wow.
And so, I'm most proud of the fact that the areas that needed to be addressed from the first survey were very much addressed in the second survey.
That's
so,
awesome.
And things like providing feedback, we scored somewhere in the 70s, and in the survey in March, we scored in the 90s, and that was really what we were shooting for. And I think that had we not addressed those issues, that ENPS score would have gone down precipitously. So, by and large, engagement on its face looks like a huge lift. It looks like, how do I do this? If you're staring at it from a 10,000-foot view, but in reality, it's just figure out what your employees want and what they need to be engaged, and do it.
Yeah.
And then once it's done, keep doing it.
Yeah.
And, if your organization offers competitive benefits, competitive salaries, equity, et cetera, if your total rewards package is a good total rewards package, then what you're looking at is career pathing. You're looking at, employees knowing where they stand with the organization, and you're looking at driving that through performance management. And, it's really, when it boils down to it, it's a rewarding process, and it's a process that is going to impact profitability in your organization 100%. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. So before we wrap up completely, I want to call back something that you said earlier, and that is, the number one thing about encouraging engagement and providing good engagement is creating a psychologically safe space for employees. So what does that look like to you?
So what it looks like to me is, and I think that it is, if you're doing the engagement activities correctly, it's a result and a byproduct of that, mm-hmm. right? It starts at the top. It starts at a place where your values have to be aligned with creating a psychologically safe organization. And so ours are investing in each other, operating with integrity, leading like a business owner, and staying positive and having fun. Those are our 4 values. And, those values lend themselves to an environment where people want to bring ideas to the forefront and feel comfortable doing it. Now, you need to reinforce that. And the way that you really, truly provide psychological safety is employees knowing where they're at, knowing the truth of their performance, employees getting feedback that reinforces that truth of their performance, and by being an environment where the best idea wins, right? Where there's no shame in bringing up an idea that doesn't win, and there's no repercussions for bringing up an idea and trying something that maybe doesn't work, right? And so, part of it is the performance management piece, where it's the feedback and it's the knowing where you stand. And the second part of it is very much rooted in values and culture, in which, we want ideas. Nobody's going to ridicule you for bringing up an idea, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you have that combination of, the performance management piece that really drives home how well an employee is doing, and a culture in which speaking up and bringing ideas to the forefront is encouraged, that's where you get that's kind of the intersection where you get psychological safety, right? And when those two things come together, what you start to see is innovation taking off. You start to see really cool things happen. It's not just following the typical roadmap. It's like, I was taking a look at the software and I think we can do this. Let's give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And, it could fail, but it's okay to fail as long as you're failing fast, right? And, when you provide that level of psychological safety, or provide that level of that culture of idea inclusion, and you're providing that employee with feedback to fail fast, to try things and fail fast, they're going to feel comfortable to continue to bring their ideas to the forefront. They're not going to feel like, well, this idea might not work, so I better not say it. They're going to say, you know what, the hell with it, let's try it. And, that's where true psychological safety comes from, is from a people operations perspective, providing that environment of feedback, providing that environment of stability, of understanding where they're at. And then from a cultural perspective, providing an environment where, you want to hear ideas, whether they're from the CEO or the janitor, right? And once those two things mesh, that's where the special things happen.
Yeah, cheers to that. Well, Buck, thank you so much for your wisdom and insight into employee engagement. It is so valuable. So in case people want to learn more about you or reach out, what's the best way to do so?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Let's see. They can shoot me an email. I'm just at, buck@wodify.com, or robert.seggelke@gmail.com. So
awesome. Well, thank you again. I am Lindsay, host of People Analytics. If you or anyone you know is like Buck, who's making the workplace better, feel free to reach out to me, Lindsay, at staffgeek.com. Thank you for listening to Staff Geek's People Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Patton, and I'm always looking to interview leaders who put people first. If you or someone you know lead with a people-first mindset, please email me at lindsay@staffgeek.com. That's LINDSAY@staffgeek.com. If you want to take things a step deeper and understand your organization's true culture DNA, I encourage you to take Staff Geek's free culture assessment. Just head to staffgeek.com and click the button that says Free Culture Assessment. Thanks again for listening.